Hey everyone, it's Nat from Frankie Designs, and today we're going to go through what basic tools you're going to need to make anything from polymer clay. We're going to go off 4 basic principles. You're going to need a surface to roll everything out on. You're going to need a roller to roll your clay with. You're going to need something to cut your clay with, and then you're going to need something to bake your clay in. Okay, so surfaces. What you're going to need is something smooth and not porous. So don't use wooden chopping boards. Don't use your marble surfaces in the kitchen. Use something that is either glass or maybe a ceramic tile. This saves the oils in the polymer clay from leaching out onto your surfaces, and it also prevents the polymer clay picking up the rough textures of whatever you're rolling it out on. So I have 2 things that I roll my clay out on. I have this glass tile. So hopefully you can see that it has all the grid lines on it and it has rulers running down the side. And I find this quite good when I'm cutting out earrings, that I get a good consistent size across the board. I can also center my pieces. So if I'm cutting something out in the middle, it's all even. If you want a cheaper option than this, because this is around $33, you can go to Bunnings and you can get single ceramic tiles like this one. So this cost me $1 at Bunnings. It is just a smooth white tile. And the best thing about these tiles are that you can actually bake your products in it. So you can go from rolling, cutting, and straight into the oven, and you don't have to take your products off the surface. Next part is what you cut your clay out with. So my favorite tool that I have is this little metal blade that you can get online. You can also get it online in all different thicknesses and all different textures or patterns, so you can get squiggly ones. The best thing about this is that you can also bend it, so when you're cutting your clay you can get a nice curve. I find good cake baking shops have the best cookie cutters, so that's all I use is cookie cutters in all different shapes and sizes. You need to make sure that you clean these every single time you use them, because polymer clay transfers color very easily. So I just have, as I said, all different cake or cookie cutters. I also have piping bag ends, which are really good, so you can get 2 different sizes for the price of 1. I also use every now and then a craft scalpel, which is good for cutting finer sections of clay. You can also get 3D printed cookie cutters. So 3D printed ones are like this. They're a little bit harder to clean because they have lots of grooves in them. But a lot of polymer clay producers are starting to make 3D printed cookie cutters. And they're really good to get funky shapes in your earrings if you are making earrings or jewelry. So that's all I use to cut my clay with. Okay, so the next part is how to add texture to your piece of clay. So here I have a whole bunch of tools that I got from the Big W cake baking section again. And I also have a whole bunch of clay tools here, which I got online with a pack of really cheap clay that I've bought. So I use these quite often to get patterns into my clay. Also, you can use them to sort of stick your clay pieces together. So I use this quite often, this embellishment, to add dots to my clay like this. And then the bigger knob, I suppose, adds even bigger ones. I find this one actually sticks to the clay and collects a lot of the clay though, which you don't want. But I also have tools, say like this end here, which adds little rows of squares to your clay. I also have these little tools here that add really small dots to your clay, which can add some really nice detailing. other little ones like this, add little, almost looks like stars, into your clay. And it's just trying to figure out what you like and what you like to use. So if you want a long stripe, possibly tools like this, add nice long stripes into your clay, like so, but can also be doubled up to combine surfaces together, like so, that add quite a lot of texture to your clay, depending on what you want and what you like or what you need. Okay, so last step is baking your clay. So every packet of clay has its own instructions on the temperature and the length of time that it needs to be in the oven. Generally, it's around 110 degrees. If you have an older oven, I highly recommend getting a thermostat to put in your oven to test what temperature it actually is in comparison to what you've set it to. This will minimize the burning of the clay. So I have a relatively new oven, and I've never burnt clay, so I think when it says 110, it's pretty close to 110. I also only ever use Fimo clay, which is usually around 110 for 30 minutes in the oven. So you'll just need an oven tray like I've got here. I've got a few components that I baked the other night. What I do is I lay it down underneath a piece of baking paper. The more I bake, the more I layer the paper, and then I just decide to get rid of it after a little bit, once I've spray painted the sealant on it too often. So I lay all of my clay out on the tray, and then I cover it loosely with a piece of foil. And I find that this bakes the clay more evenly. It also prevents burning. Don't cover your pieces with the foil because it's going to pick up the texture of the foil, and you don't want that on your clay because you can't get rid of it once it's baked. Okay, so once it's baked, you'll pull it out of the oven, and you should let it sit in the oven with the door open to let it cool down, because the baking process hasn't finished once you've pulled it out of the oven. So when you pull it out of the oven, it's going to be still a little bit soft and it's going to be a little bit bendy. But once it cools down, it will dry and it will be rock hard. It will, I say rock hard, it will and it should have just a tiniest little bit of bend in it. The cheaper clay that you get online will have a lot of bend in it. It won't feel hard to touch. And it won't feel like clay. The cheaper ones sort of start to feel like rubber, and it will have a lot of give in it, to the point where you could probably snap it in half. Don't go trying to snap this in half though, it will snap, but this is sort of what you should get. A nice smooth piece of clay, depending on what you've cut out, and it should just have the tiniest little bit of bend. Don't know if you can see that, but that's what it should be like. Okay, so lastly, I'm just going to end this video with a few tips and tricks for using polymer clay. So I'm going to do a whole video on clay and how to use it, but just generally some things that you should have close to you whilst using polymer clay. So my first tip is to get yourself some disposable gloves. Clay, as I said before, the colors transfer quite quickly. So if you have, say, if you've been using red clay and then you go to use with white clay, the transfer of color is going to be very quick and it's going to ruin your white piece of clay. So I highly recommend having a box of disposable gloves nearby. In saying that, I would also have a packet of wipes very close by, and every single time you use a different color of clay, clean your surface, clean all of your tools, and clean your pasta machine, which is very difficult to do, but clean your pasta machine, and this will stop the transfer of color and the transfer of fluff. Fluff, so is my next tip. Don't wear anything dark. When you use polymer clay, don't wear anything fluffy, because the fluff will transfer so quickly to your clay and it is quite difficult to get out. So wash your hands every time you go to use polymer clay and wipe them down or dry them with paper towel, not a tea towel, because you're adding fluff back to your hands. The easiest tool I have learnt to use is old scrap clay like so, and it will pick up all the fluff on all of your surfaces, including your hands. So I wash my hands with paper towel and then I just press the clay over my hands like so, and it'll pick up any of the fluff on my hands. I also do this for all of my surfaces. So I roll the clay over the surface like so, and I clean it down and get rid of all of the fluff, and you can see that it's picked up all the stuff that is on my tile. So get a light colored piece of clay to do this, keep it nearby, obviously don't use it for anything else, and just clean all of your surfaces with it after you've cleaned it with the disinfectant wipes. If you like the tips and the tricks, please like and subscribe. If you subscribe, you'll get updates for more videos because there are going to be plenty more